All right. The IRS owes your child care center money. Let me tell you how. So we all know what happened during COVID. It was a mess. Something unprecedented that no one's ever heard of before, right? And here's the thing. Tens of millions of taxpayers, child care center owners included, may be entitled to refunds or abatements. We'll talk about what both of those are, of COVID-19 period penalties and interest. So penalties and interest that were paid or that were owed during the COVID time, which was actually 3.5 years, that is potentially something that you can get refunds for. So let's talk about it. First, the relief from those penalties is not guaranteed, and it is not automatic. The automatic part being the most important. Most taxpayers must file refund claims before July 10th, 2026 in order to protect their refund claims. So you would have to file some forms in order to claim that refund. So let's get into it. Recently, there was a court case called Kwong versus the United States. This was Kwong going versus the IRS. And in that, the IRS, the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, decided that the penalties and interest that were assessed during the three and a half year COVID period, that was considered a federal disaster period. And during a federal disaster period, they're not supposed to be charging you penalties and interest, and your tax returns are not even supposed to be due. So your 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023 tax returns were not supposed to be due until 2023 after the disaster period ended. And so this case has made it so that you can go back and file claim for those refunds. Again, they are not automatic. So here's the important part. We have to get it done by July 10th of 2026. If it's not done by then, it might just go away. And of course, while it's true that this is completely legal and it is completely court sanctioned, the IRS is going to keep quiet about it. They're not going to inform taxpayers. They're just going to quietly try to get this to go away. They're going to try to quietly get it to where as few taxpayers claim it back as possible. And so I don't want your child care center to be one of those taxpayers that ends up having those penalties or having that interest and it stays within the IRS's hands. I want it back in yours. You feel me? Okay. So in order to protect your rights, you have to claim it. So here's what it looks like. You would have to review. So first, you have to review your tax account transcripts. So you're going to want to go to irs.gov and log into it. If you don't already have a login, go ahead and create one. There's a couple of steps that you'll need to do. And when you do that, you're going to want to make sure that you look up your account transcript. You're going to want to look it up for 2020, 2021, 2022 and 2023. That those 3.5 years, you're going to want to look up that information to find out whether or not there are any penalties or interest on your account. So when you do that, if you see any penalties or interest there, then you can go ahead and claim refund for that. You can take action and actually be able to get that money back. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about the refund rules and the timeframes. We're going to talk about the difference between a formal claim for refund and what an abatement is, or a protective claim and refund and abatement, and what that means and why that's important for you. And then we're going to talk about how to request those refunds or abatements and common mistakes that a lot of people are going to have that you should avoid so that they don't end up kicking it back to you. All right, so first let's understand the refund deadlines. Here's why July 10th of 2026 matters. All right, so the law authorizes the IRS to issue a credit or refund when you have overpaid your taxes, your penalties or interest. So taxes, penalties, and interest can all be refunded to you. However, it's time sensitive. You have to file the claim in a specific time period in order for it to count. If you miss the deadline, you permanently lose your refund. Permanently. There's nothing you can do about it. So the deadline is so important. Generally, you have to file a claim or credit for refund within 3 years of when you filed your tax return, or 2 years from the date that you paid the tax. But under this special court case, the payment deadlines have been postponed because of COVID. So the federal disaster period, again, from January 20th of 2020 all the way through May 11th of 2023, and then they give you an additional 60 days. So that's how we come up with July 10th of 2026. So any filing deadlines, any payment deadlines for any income tax returns that you had from all the way back from 2019, because that was due in 2019, all the way through 2022, all of that can potentially be refunded back to you. So one point of that might be a little bit confusing is how the 3-year rule works when you filed your tax return before it was due. So basically, if you filed the tax return before the due date, so the due date, let's say, is April 15th and you filed it on March 2nd, okay, so that's before the due date. The early filing date that you had does not start the refund period early. You still get to go by the later of the date that was actually filed or the date that you actually, the due date was. So if you filed on March 2nd and it was due on April 15th, then April 15th is the date that your refund was due. Okay, so don't be confused by that. Don't feel like you have to rush any additional amount than anyone else if you filed your returns early. That's actually, generally speaking, a pretty good thing. It means you're fairly organized. But I want you to know that under that reasoning, the due date is still the July 10th. So you're safe there. Okay. So here's 2 examples of the refund deadlines, just so I can make sure that I'm clear about what the refund deadlines are. So imagine that you filed your 2021 income tax return on August 30th, 2022, right? And you're like, August? Wait a minute. Yes, you filed it in August without an extension and you paid the tax when you filed. Then the IRS would assess a failure to file penalty because you didn't file it on time, and a failure to pay penalty plus interest on the amount that was not paid by April of 2022. And so because the IRS has already decided that the return was late. So the taxpayer, you, the Child Care Center, would pay the penalties and interest. Let's say you paid it in October of 2022. Based off of the Kwong case, your 2021 tax return was not due until July 10th of 2023. Yes, your 2021 tax return wasn't even due until 2023. 3 years after, 2 years after you filed the return. So you can now file a refund claim until July 10th of 2026 in order to get that back. All right, here's the second example. Assume that the same facts that we talked about above, except for now you don't pay the penalties or interest at all, right, until 2025, right? Imagine that the return was filed timely, there was no penalties, there's no interest, that you would have until 2027, okay? The date whenever you paid it, 2 years from the date that you paid it. But if you filed your tax return, or if the IRS has already assessed that tax, now is the time to go ahead and jump on that. Okay, so we've talked about the deadline and what it is. It's July 10th for most people of 2026, which is only about a month away from today. Here's the thing. Refund claims, protective refund claims, and abatement request. Those are 3 different things. And I'm not trying to make you a tax expert here, but I do want you to be knowledgeable so that you can go either to your CPA or we'd welcome you right on over here at Little Ledgers to allow you to be able to be knowledgeable about what's happening and whether it applies to you. So you should understand the difference between a couple of things: a refund claim, a protective refund claim, and an abatement request. So a refund claim is you asking the IRS to return money that you've already paid. So you paid the tax, you paid the penalties, and you paid the interest, and you're asking for one of those things back for them to refund it to you. That's the refund claim. A protective refund claim asks the IRS to preserve your right to a refund when you can't figure out yet how much the final amount is that you're asking for or what you're entitled to yet, because the event, let's say, is based off of a future event. So that might be like the final outcome of this court case or new IRS guidance that they put out, it allows you to put that request in to where it saves your right to claim that refund. And then the third thing, an abatement request asks the IRS to remove or reduce an amount that the IRS has already assessed or said you owe. So let's say that the IRS said you owed $500 in penalties, or heck, $5,000 in penalties, and they said you owed $5,000 in interest. So you've got $10,000 that the IRS says you owe in penalties and interest, but you haven't paid it yet. The abatement request is then saying, hey, we want you to remove that amount that you say we owe, or reduce the amount you say we owe. We haven't paid it yet, but we need you to reduce what you're asking for, or remove what you're asking for. That is called an abatement request. Okay, so that's something you have not paid yet, but the IRS says you owe. So you have three different things. Again, let's go back to them: refund claims, protective refund claims, and abatement requests. So that distinction matters because refund claims, which are money that you have already paid, and abatement requests are subject to different rules. So the refund deadline is the refund deadline applies when you are asking the IRS to return money that you've already paid, and if you haven't paid the penalties and interest yet, you're asking the IRS to remove or reduce them. That is an abatement request, not a refund. Okay, so there's two different things that we need to take into consideration here. So you need to choose between a formal refund claim, meaning you already paid it and you want it back, or a protective refund claim, or an abatement request. So there's three different options of being able to claim this money. So the law allows for you to file formal claims for refund or abatement or protective claims to get your money back or to reduce the amount you owe. So here's the thing: when you file a formal refund claim, it does more to preserve your right to recover money, because you know exactly how much you're asking for back. You've already paid for it, and you're requesting that they refund it. Okay, and so there's different procedures depending on which of those that you have, and it's worth it for you whether you've already paid, whether you're not sure whether you should or had money that's due back to you or not, or whether or not you have put the you owe it but you haven't paid it yet. In all three of those situations, you still want to be able to file this paperwork to make sure that you can get those refunds if they are there, or reduce the amount you owe if you do owe. So let's talk about how you file these refund claims or protective claims. So refund claims are typically filed using your initial tax return. So if you file a 1040 tax return, which is the tax return for individual taxpayers, and you haven't filed your refund, you haven't filed for a refund, you would just claim that on what's called an amended tax return. If you've already filed it, then you can do it on that amended tax. If you've already filed it, you can do it on that amended tax return. So those forms are what adjust your tax liability, what you owe. And this conversation is kind of based off of that, but businesses have the same logic. So whether you are an S corporation, with which most commercial childcare centers are S corporations, you would then be able to claim it on your 1120S, and you would then file an amended tax return. But that's not what we're going to do in this case. Under this federal case called Kwong, if you're claiming refunds related to that, you don't need to file it for your, you don't need to amend your tax return. You should instead file a Form 843, okay? The Form 843 is a claim for refund, request, or abatement, okay? You need to complete that form in order to be able to get it. And guess what? You can't file it electronically, so you've got to mail it. Okay, I'm assuming the IRS is going to get tons of these coming forward. But in order to claim that refund, you have to file Form 843. All right, and on that Form 843, you need to complete the different line items, include the tax years. So what tax years are you claiming for? 2019, 2021, which ones, and the amount that you're requesting for the refund. That needs to be included as well. It's technical. I know it's a little technical, but it's an important distinction. If you've already paid the amounts, you're requesting a refund. Okay, so check the box for the refund. if they say that you owe the tax, but you have not paid it yet, you are requesting an abatement. All right. So unlike the formal refund claim, a protective claim doesn't require you to calculate the amount that you're requesting the refund for. It only preserves the amount should there be something there. So you would require, in order to do that, you would need to have that refund claim written in writing. Again, you'll have to send that out. You include your name, your address, so your social, your tax identification number, your EIN, your contact information, all needs to be there. And then go ahead and let them know the reason that you're wanting to protect this information, which would be Kwong. All right. And then clearly alert the IRS what the basis of the claim is, which would be Kwong, and also the specific tax years involved. Okay, so you're going to let them know that. A request for an abatement is using the same form, Form 843, and you're asking the IRS to abate, remove, reduce the amount of penalties and interest that's been assessed but not paid. So same form, just you're requesting something different. If you request a refund when you need an abatement, they're gonna tear it up and put it in the circle file. Okay. If you mark abatement and you're requesting a refund, same thing. You're not asking for the right thing, and so it's a technicality where you may not get that refund back. Okay. So you need to include a copy of your transcript, an explanation of what the penalties were. They were COVID-19 related for that federal disaster period. You want to tell them what the penalty and interest amounts were, and include any copies of any IRS notices saying, hey, you had a penalty or you owe interest, anything like that. You want to include those as well. You can find all of that in your IRS taxpayer account by logging into irs.gov. Okay. For protective claims, you still need to focus on the legal issue, which is Kwong. You also want to specify the specific dates or penalties that are at issue, what years they are, and if you do know the amount, go ahead and let them know, but you can otherwise leave that blank. So here's what the common mistakes are that you want to avoid. You want to make sure that you are not missing the deadline. That is number one. That is the most important. You want to make sure that you're not filing a vague protective claim. You want to make sure that you say the year, the legal issue, and the reason why you're claiming it. Then you need to make sure that you have proof that you mailed it. Don't just mail it out with a basic stamp on it. Make sure that you put a certified return receipt on there so that you can verify what date it was sent and what date they received it, and have them sign it and send that back to you. You can get either an electronic or a paper return receipt to you. Okay. And then make sure that you use the right IRS address. Do not send it to the wrong address. If it's going to the wrong address, again, technicality, it's not going to reach the right people. And then if you put too many of the different claims on one Form 843, you want to file a different one for each year. So don't put it all on one. Hopefully this was helpful. I know it's a little bit complex, but I wanted to make sure that I got this information out to you because you've only got less than 30 days now to make sure that you can claim this for your child care center, whether you're a home daycare provider, whether you're a commercial provider, whether you have multiple locations. If you had any penalties or interest, late filing, late paying, estimated tax penalties, anything like that during that time, you want to make sure that you take advantage of this and go ahead and get it done. If you would like our assistance, go ahead and go to littleledgers.com and select book a call, and we will make sure to have a call with you and walk you through the process of working with us to be able to do this on your behalf if you don't want to take that on yourself. I am glad you joined for the live today, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.